Welcome to Sharp Football Analysis. Today, Freeman and I are going to discuss Kimani Vidal, the Bucs wide receiver situation, and all the best waiver wire ads for week 7 of the fantasy football season. So make sure you stick around. What is up, everybody? My name is Raymond. This is Sharp Football Analysis, the Monday edition of Sharp Football Analysis. At least we record this on Monday afternoons, and we're talking about the waiver wire as we do every week. And if we're talking about the waiver wire, there's only one person to talk about that with, and that is Freeman Smith of FAABLab, creator of FAABLab, a wonderful tool that will help you figure out how much you need to bid on the players you want this week. So make sure you go and check it out. And we're excited for him to be here. How you doing, Freeman?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. But this is the week I was dreading where somebody like Egbuka gets injured and I have to go on and try to give people advice on how to take advantage of that. So this is it's been a pretty fortunate year for me injury-wise, and everybody else has been really struggling. So this is the first time that I really have to conflict my personal opinions with the FAABLab advice.
The Puka injury stole my soul, because I had been living clean with Puka. I was big on him. Obviously, especially when the dip started in best ball season, I drafted a lot of him. Hasn't exactly helped my advance rate. Hey, but we're coming back, baby. We're coming back. We're above average now. So there we go. But yeah, so it's, I've been big on Puka, and that injury almost stole my soul. But I'm a Penn State fan, and they fired James Franklin, and so nothing bad's happening to me. Life's going good, boys. Life is going good. I'm glad you brought up. We talk about the Bucs wide receiver situation, the Rams wide receiver situation. It's a very odd week on the waiver wire, because when you go out there and look, obviously if you're in a shallower league, there might be some guys out there that you might spend some FAAB dollars on. But in more active leagues of, I assume, people who are listening to this are probably in that more active league category. There's not a lot out there that I think you're going to get really excited about. Maybe if Vidal slipped through, and we will talk about Vidal just kind of like I think for most people here, more of a process idea than anything else. But, if there's Vidal's out there, then maybe you can get excited. But overall, there's just a lot of weird situations. We mentioned the Rams. We don't know what's going to happen with Puka Nacua. And even if Nacua is out, it seems like Atwell's going to play. So it's not like you can just go straight to Jordan Whittington, right? We don't know what that's going to look like. Garrett Wilson, we don't know what his injury is. We don't even know if it's a hip or knee injury. It could be both. We don't know. Like, we're still waiting on information about that. And do you want to be part of that passing offense anyway? Obviously, we got the Bucs, the Cardinals in general as a team, as an idea, as an existence. We have no idea what's going on with the Cardinals at receiver, at quarterback, at running back. No idea. Titans wide receivers, they don't have a coach anymore. Do we care that Calvin Ridley's likely going to be out? David Njoku is hurt. What does that look like? Every 49ers player is hurt. Juwan Jennings is apparently playing through 5 broken ribs, which, if he's actually playing through 5 broken ribs, I mean, that's incredible that's what he's doing, and then fair play to him. But, Kendrick Bourne is apparently the second coming of Randy Moss. So we don't know anything. It's a very weird week. And it stands out to me as one of those weeks where we're going to look back and somebody of value, somebody that's really going to be a meaningful player in the fantasy playoffs, is just going to kind of slip through the cracks, and someone's going to get him for 1 or 2%, or maybe even free of their FAAB budget. And they're going to look back and go, man, I wish that's a guy I would have got. Unfortunately, I don't know who that guy is, but it just feels like one of those weeks.
Yeah. Last year, when we were looking at the best FAAB ads through the middle of the season, that definitely was the case. And it's tough, though, because you have to avoid all these minds. Like, every week there's, I think the last year this time, the most popular FAAB ad was Sean Tucker, and he had that monster big week and then just didn't really do anything else. And you see a lot of the same names that are even popping up this year. And one metric I found was that if anybody's most recent week was more than double their running 3-week average, they basically didn't hit it all last year. So obviously injuries and things make it so people get unusual situations where they're going to outscore, but having a little bit of a base roll seems to be a big predictor. But yeah, there were a lot of really good values that came out of these super small bids around this time last year. So I think generally spending your FAAB in the middle of the season seems like it is not as good of a return. But if you're going to, I think those smaller bids and taking a lot of shots is the most likely way to hit on a league winner.
Yeah, we were actually talking about this before we got started. This notion, like I have several good teams that I feel really good about. Many of them have Rashee Rice coming back, and so I feel really good about that. Obviously, if you're 4-2, 5-1, whatever, and you're getting Rashee Rice back, you're feeling great about that. But even on those teams, I'm still going to keep cycling the bottom of that roster. Like you have to keep cycling the bottom of the roster and take these shots and try to figure out, right? So, like for instance, we'll get to Vidal in a second, but I wasn't very excited about Vidal last week, but I still added him. I had actually added him the week before, right? Whenever Najee, or I think it was 2 weeks before when Najee Harris went down, because I was like, why not? Is it in deeper leagues? You're in a 14-team league with a big bench, whatever, right? There are not a lot of people out there. So you just have to take these shots, and sometimes it hits and sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes it doesn't necessarily hit, but then they come back. Trey Tucker's a great example of that. Like I think we both had some concerns about what Trey Tucker's role would ultimately be. And then he didn't, obviously, after that massive game hit. But now you look over the last couple of weeks and he's kind of developed a nice little baseline where, like, Trey Tucker, I'm starting him in the Scott Fish Bowl and I'm feeling pretty good about what I'm getting out of him. And so, yeah, you just have to keep rotating that roster, churning that roster, and try to figure out, especially in deep leagues, and try to go. And this week's going to be a good week for that, because you can take a shot on Tez Johnson or Jordan Whittington or or I guess Van Jefferson, although I don't think that you can do that. But like you could take a shot on those kinds of guys, and then maybe you get lucky. And then that's ultimately what helps, maybe not like the upper end of your roster, but that gives you some depth as we get through the big buys, because this is the last little one this week with just the Bills and Ravens. We're going to get into like the big 16 buys coming up. And so that's going to make things a lot more difficult.
Yeah. And we've already seen a lot this year. Like maybe you got Rico Dowdle or Kendrick Bourne, and you're already getting the most out of those little small FAAB bids. It's funny, last year this time, Kimani Vidal was actually one of the more popular bids. He was just about 5%.
Yeah.
And it was, week 7, I think he started to get a little usage. Some of the preseason hype was popping back up. And so he went for 5%. I think ended up not really being a good return on investment, but it's a good example of, you never know with these guys, because we could have said the same thing with a guy like Quentin Johnston, who, we already bid on him last year. But yeah, some of the stuff, it's like, just doesn't make any sense, So people will tell you, eventually Martin Hampton's going to be back, or the Chargers aren't going to give Kimani Vidal a big workload, or, they're going to trade for Brees or something like this. But these are all the sort of reasons that would make sense if you're spending a lot on him, or if it was preseason, drafting him high. But if you're just going to throw a couple bucks on it, like, we just clearly don't know. So use that uncertainty to your advantage, and be bold when others are fearful.
Yeah, and I actually think that's a good process question. I want to get to Vidal. Before we do that, though, I do want to mention, if you're not already, make sure you subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications, both on YouTube, or, if you're listening to the podcast, subscribe to that so you don't miss any of our exclusive analysis. We are now 5-1 on our featured prop of the week, giving out on the Friday show. You don't want to miss those free bets. Make sure you tune in on Friday and win with us this weekend. And then also, starting on Tuesday, so whenever you're listening to this, starting on Tuesday, we're going to run a special promotion. We do this every single week. We give all our NFL prop betting recommendations for week 7 for just 1 penny. So 1 penny gets you all of our prop recommendations for the week. And we have a lot. Every single week, there's a lot of prop recommendations that come out. So all of that is available to you. To learn more, go to sharpfootballanalysis.com, click on the blue bar, and you'll get more information. I'll tell you, one of the props that I bet pretty heavily last night was Jared Goff over 30.5 passing attempts. And if we just get one of those 2 catches at the end, we get there. And I'm not on tilt about it still. Don't put in the paper that I'm still mad about that. But I want to get to Vidal and kind of the idea here, because I said last week that I had him ahead of Haskins. I had him as my number 2 pickup behind Michael Carter. That's a whole another situation, right? We'll get to it in a second. But like, I had him there and I said, okay, this is a guy you can go and pick up. And, if you get him, great. But I wasn't that interested in spending a lot of FAAB on him, because I thought it was going to be a convoluted situation. Turns out, at least based on 1 week, I was dead wrong about that. And I'll eat my L, and that's the way we go. But I think it's interesting to talk about this from like more of a process stance, because I get nervous about a lot of these pickups, if I'm going to come out and say, I really like this guy, go and get him. But you mentioned Vidal last season, and I was one of the Vidal backers last season. I really wish that the points that he's scoring now would be attributed to my 2024 best ball squads, because that would really help me out as we go through there, because I had him in a ton of those leagues. By the way, I have Kyle Monangai in a bunch of leagues this year, so keep an eye on Kyle Monangai for 2026. But yeah, so like I really like Vidal, and I just was like, this looks like a convoluted situation. We're hearing rumors that it might be Haskins. Obviously, Haskins has the connection to Harbaugh going back to Michigan, and I just didn't let my player take of I think Kimani Vidal is pretty good. I didn't let that lead it, and I probably should have just let it lead it and say I think Kimani Vidal is pretty good. You're probably not gonna have to spend a ton to get him, because it's not, it's not like everybody's super excited. I don't know what he actually ended up finishing up on FAABLab last week, but you didn't have to spend a ton of FAAB to go and get him. And at some point, you just have to, trust yourself. If you think a player is good, trust yourself and let fantasy receipts sort it out, right? And that's kind of where I was with Vidal last week, and I didn't do it, didn't trust myself, and I might have missed out. Now I say might, because I have some cold water to throw on this in a second, but I'm just interested in your thoughts on that kind of talk about, hey, if you actually like a guy and he's not going to cost you a ton, I just go out and get him and like trust yourself and hope for the best.
Yeah, I think that's the better process, especially with just how much uncertainty is going on this season and in the middle of the season in general. I think I would rather spend money on some of those potential running backs. It might be Kimani Vidal in 2 weeks, rather than buy high on a guy who just got to play the Dolphins run D, and it might have had the best single game of his career.
Are you talking about someone specific? Kimani Vidal, maybe?
Yeah, and so like I think now if he's still on waivers, he's gonna go for a pretty good amount, especially this time of year. Like people are losing running backs so much, and half your league is probably in a situation where they need to spend now to try to make a playoff push. And so he might be the kind of guy that's just priced out of his value. And then there's going to be another one in 2 weeks. And we've seen this year specifically. I think it's been like every single week there's a new league winner, right? It's Trey Benson, Michael Carter, Rico Dowdle, Hassan Haskins. It's like every week there's a new hot running back. And I feel like they're so relatively predictable who it's going to be or who the pool is, that might as well just spend a couple bucks and get next week's Isaiah Davis, or I don't want to wish ill on any running backs by just naming their backups, but I think you see what I mean.
Yeah, and I think that's why, if you got Vidal last week, obviously you're super excited. If you just were holding him in Dynasty, you're excited to see what happens. But we did see in the first quarter, it was 12 snaps for Vidal to 8 for Haskins. It was a more even split. Then obviously Vidal had made some big plays. The final 3 quarters, it was 31-12 Vidal snaps. But that does suggest that we could get hot-handed at some point, right? What happens next week if Vidal comes out and is not as successful, right? And Haskins has a couple of big runs, and suddenly that completely flips. Like we could have that situation. We also have open the opportunity, as we've heard, that the Chargers are after running backs, because Hampton, while the initial thing was like, oh, he's only going to miss 4 weeks, now it seems like he's going to miss longer. And so maybe they're after running backs. You mentioned Isaiah Davis. Maybe they're after Breece Hall, right? Like, so we're going to have to see kind of where this ends up. And the other thing about Vidal, and I like Vidal, like I've been a supporter. I have him in a lot of dynasty rosters, but he still had a 22.2% negative run rate last week. It's 22.7 this season. It was an issue last season, right? Like he is more of this boom or bust kind of runner, because he does have a lot of explosive plays. Obviously he creates explosive runs. That's what we saw against the Dolphins. But as you mentioned, that was that's a really good matchup. And so, where are those? But we have seen him do that before. What's actually interesting about Vidal and what we saw from him this past week is that's kind of what I expected a Marion Hampton to do, be that kind of player, like have negative runs, but then be explosive. And so that is interesting that's what we got out of him. But like, there are some red flags here, despite that breakout, based on just what happens if they trade for somebody. What happens if they are just riding hot hand and we have Haskins come out? What happens if, they get tired of Vidal getting stuffed 25% of his runs? What happens if the offensive line gets healthy and we go back to a really high pass rate offense? That's actually probably better for Vidal than it is, for Haskins, but, we don't know. There are some red flags here. So if you're having to spend 25% of your FAAB, that's different than if you were able to get him for cheaper last week. So it is a bit of a tricky situation.
Yeah, and what if they are actually down and need some pass protection? I think Vidal outsnapped Haskins 43-20, but we didn't see them really need to create a lot of protection and try to run these deep routes that they were doing earlier in the season. So I'd be curious to see. Yeah, I would have thought that Haskins was more of the pass pro guy. So I'd be curious to see what would happen in a situation where they're relying on someone like that. But Kimani Vidal did run more routes, so maybe that would end up working in his favor as well. But a lot of uncertainty, and I think that's kind of the point, is uncertainty is good at 4% of your FAAB budget, and it's not at 30%.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. All right, let's move on to talk about the Bucs wide receiver situation, another uncertain situation because of all of the injuries. Obviously, we lose Emeka Egbuka to the hamstring injury. It looks like he's going to miss some time. Todd Bowles has already ruled out Chris Godwin for week 7. He also ruled out Bucky Irving, by the way, for week 7. And so we're already there. We haven't gotten a lot of information on Mike Evans' injury. We did hear Todd Bowles, by the way, and I should have said this at the beginning. We're recording this on Monday afternoon. That's why if something happens on Monday night, we're not going to talk about that, obviously, because we're recording before that. And also, if a Chargers trade for somebody after we've done recording, obviously, that changes things. So if something gets outdated by the time you listen to this, that's why we're recording on Monday afternoon. But we don't know about Mike Evans yet. Todd Bowles did say, he hopes that he could practice this week, but that it's not really a strong indication. And so we're in this very odd situation with the Bucs. We don't know who's going to be available. Even if, Mike Evans comes back and is available, we don't know which of these wide receivers we really should go out and trust. And it makes it a tricky situation, but it also could make it like a lot more. It could make it like a very valuable player come out of this. Is it Tez Johnson? Is it Kameron Johnson? Is it Sterling Shepard? We don't know, but it is a bit of an interesting situation.
Yeah, so maybe your Monangai shares will look good after Monday night. We'll see.
We'll see.
This will be the coming out party, but with the Bucs, I think between the wide receivers, I'd probably lean Sterling Shepard, but I also think there's a good chance that Cade Otton just steps up as the next guy. Last year, we saw the same thing. Cade Otton had a really good month when I think it was Mike Evans and Godwin were out at the same time.
Yeah, both were out, yeah.
Yeah. And I remember I had him, and he was a godsend for a month. And then when they came, he just immediately went back to having a pretty diminished receiving role. So what I really think that means is that Baker's just one of these guys like Stafford who just really kind of picks a target. I think he goes through his reads, but like Egbuka is a perfect example. He seemed to just really like Egbuka and trust him, and so he was peppering with targets. It's not like Egbuka was getting these crazy separation metrics or anything like that. I think they just had good chemistry, and so I would guess that chemistry just continues down the list. So Cade Otton, he's got a history with Sterling Shepard, obviously, and I would guess Tez is probably the third one. He's got sort of that shiny new object, being a rookie, but he's also seventh round draft pick. Is that right? And what was the story?
Late.
Yeah, you're more of a college football guy. What was the deal with? He's like Bo Nix's adopted brother. Talking about
so I don't know. Yeah, I don't know that complete story. But the story on him falling is Tez Johnson was expected to be a 7th round pick, a much higher pick. And when you watched him play in college, it seemed like he was fast. But then he's very small. Like I forget what he weighed in at, but it was like 150 pounds.
Baker made fun of him on the flip. He said he could do it if he was 142 pounds, but hasn't weighed that since 6th grade. So.
Yeah, so he ran
chemistry.
He ran a 4.51 at that weight, which 4.51, obviously, if one of us ran that'd be blazing, right? But you get to be that weight and run a 4.51, and so he fell, but he was very productive in college. Can confirm as Penn State played him, but he was very productive in college, and so it is an interesting thing. And to your point about the wide receivers, Sterling Shepard is the one whose role I trust the most, no matter what happens here amongst the wide receivers. I think you're right about Cade Otton. That's the target to me based on what we know. We've actually seen his target rate spike in the last 2 games, which is obviously good. And he has an 88.7% dropback rate this season, which is really good for a tight end. And so, route rate on dropback. So like that's Otten is definitely the guy I'm looking towards. But if we're looking at the receivers, Sterling Shepard is probably safer. We know what he is. We know what his role is going to be. But I don't think his role expands all that much with Mike Evans doesn't come back. Like I think he just kind of is who he is. He has 9.6 air yards per target this season. I don't know how high the upside is. I do think if we're looking for upside, Tez Johnson is the answer over Kameron Johnson. Tez Johnson has just been playing consistently without Evans and Godwin. And so I think that with Ibuka out, but Evans back, which is kind of what I expect to happen here, that we're going to see more Tez Johnson than we will of, anybody else. And so if I'm targeting a wide receiver, he's the guy. But if Evans comes back and they have Otten, what ultimately is that target upside, right? And I think that that's really the question here. It is a great matchup. We know all of the issues that Detroit has in their secondary and all of the injury issues they have that I don't think are going to get any better ahead of Monday night in this big game. And so that's all there. And maybe Evans doesn't come back because they have a bye. I think their bye's in week 9, not in week 8. So there's a longer range, but that could suggest that Ibuka is going to miss 2 games, right? And so there's a lot of stuff going on here. If I was targeting a wide receiver, it'd be Johnson, but I think that Evans comes back, we get a lot more Otten, and then it's not maybe as exciting as you would want it to be.
Yeah, and I think the Lions secondary just got a little worse because you see that tweet just now from Shefty that Brian Branch is suspended. So it looks like it's a pretty juicy matchup for Buccaneers pass catchers. And Tez Johnson's got a little bit of that star power too. If you for being such a late round pick, like if you listen to his interview and stuff, he was saying he thought the MVP chance were for him. And I could see it's not great analysis, but it does sort of seem like the kind of guy that Baker would have a good rapport with. So maybe that'll.
We have Rich Rebar makes all of his fantasy decisions based on the rule of cool. He is he's really into vibes, and I agree with you. He seems like a Baker Mayfield kind of. And to be fair to Tez Johnson, he was a star in college, so fair play to him for sure. All right, let's get to our third kind of topic of discussion here. Before we do that, though, I do want to mention go to FAABLab. FAABLab is a wonderful tool to FAABLab.app to get access to what people are going to be going for this week, especially this week of all weeks where it's going to be all over the place. It's a great place to get an idea of how much players are going to go for it and go out and get them. And by the way, you might find an exclusive offer over at FAABLab.app. So make sure you do that. And then also subscribe to podcasts, YouTube, all of that jazz. We do appreciate it. All right, let's go through the Cardinals running back situation. We'll talk about the wide receivers here in a bit, but let's do the running back situation first. We obviously had Michael Carter as the lead back. Last week we had DeMercado had the whole thing that happened. And then, by the way, he got hurt this week. And so we were like, all right, Michael Carter, we're established, we're safe. And then Adam Schefter comes out an hour and a half before kickoffs and says, no, it's actually going to be Bam Knight this week that's going to start. That was kind of true, I guess, a little bit. If you actually look at the two of them, Knight played 34 snaps, had 12 touches, 11 carries. Michael Carter played 32 snaps, had 11 touches, 9 carries. Bam Knight did get the touchdown and had 5 of 6 snaps in goal to go, which, got you there from a fantasy perspective, but Carter was obviously heavily involved as well. And what it kind of seems like to me is that Carter has taken on the passing game role, which was what we kind of thought for DeMercado, right? He just kind of took that over. Bam Knight moved into that early down role, and now we're stuck in a timeshare in this Cardinals offense that might not have Kyler Murray, might not have Marvin Harrison, and you're like, how excited am I actually about any of this going up against a Green Bay defense this week where they might be down, early and often. And so it's kind of, I was much more excited about Michael Carter last week than I am Bam Knight this week, given the usage split that we saw here in week 6.
Yeah, it was pretty weird to me because I was thinking Carter was going to be the between the 20s kind of consistent guy, which I think was the plan. But the Cardinals are so interesting how they seem so committed to the way they split up their roles. And then it's like if somebody goes down, they're willing to just, despite that person's talents and play style, just slot them into whatever role they need. And so I do think you're right. It seemed like, so Carter ran 21 routes to Bam Knight's 13. And just situationally, it seemed like Carter was definitely the passing down guy. So schedules, Packers, bye: Cowboys, Seahawks, Niners, Jags, Bucs. So you definitely want the guy who's going to get the passing down work there, right, and long down a distance. But I don't know. The whole thing was very uninspiring, like you said, and I kind of feel like I know the Amari DiMarcado thing was so public, and it seems like he's in the doghouse. But I really feel like he's the exact kind of guy they could use post bye if he comes back. Or all of this is sort of making me just want to stash Trey Benson for the fantasy playoffs or something, because it just seems like such a mess, and I don't really think there's a lot of value to be gleaned out of all these former abandoned Jets running backs.
Yeah, I mean, it is that's kind of where we are, right? Like, it's like I'm not excited. If I have to take a shot, it'll be on Carter, I guess, like, especially in PPR. But like, if you're in a standard league, you'd probably more be interested in Bam Knight just getting a touchdown, right? And like, that's going to be the way you get out of it. And because of the way running back is, if you get a touchdown in those leagues, like, you're probably a flex play. You're probably returning value at that. And so maybe that's what we look at. And then you said, the fantasy playoffs. And so they do have a good matchup against the Bengals in week 17. We'll see what the Falcons defense is by the time we get there. But like you mentioned, some of their other stuff, they got the Texans, they got the Rams as well in that kind of late season. And so it's not an exciting situation. But I do think you can pick up Bam Knight. Obviously, this is part of what we talked about at the beginning. Churn that roster, see what happens. After the Schefter tweet, I got really nervous in a very big league with a very short bench, and only four bench spots in that league with 2 quarterbacks. It makes roster management very, 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 very interesting. But I ended up just dropping Carter straight up for Bam Knight, and it worked out for this week. But I kind of think I might have made a mistake in the long run, on a Sunday morning, just off of a Schefter tweet. So it is one of those odd situations.
Yeah, you got kind of lucky, because I feel like that hour before kickoff Schefter tweet about who the actual starter is usually a harbinger of doom. Like, that's such a classic trap. I feel like that I'll start that guy because I'm desperate, and then he ends up starting the first series and playing 4 more snaps or something.
One of those might have cost me $1 million one time, but that's a
oh yeah, I know
that's a story for a different day. But yes, I hold no ill will, but I may have held some ill will as Christian McCaffrey continued to score points that afternoon, and I saw that I would have won $1 million. But what are you gonna do? All right, so let's hit on some deep cuts. Actually, I guess we just continue this Cardinal situation with Marvin Harrison as we head into the deep cuts. Marvin Harrison, by the way, these deep cuts, these are players available in at least 95% of ESPN leagues. This is for all you not in my league degenerates, although I'm sure you're still mad at me mentioning some of these names. But these are guys that are pretty widely available that might be interesting. Keeping it with the Cardinals, obviously Marvin Harrison left that game with a concussion. We'll have to see, what happens with that. Oftentimes concussions now, most people miss a game. We'll have to see kind of where we go. But we saw Zay Jones really step up into a very large role without Marvin Harrison Jr. He had an 85% route rate, 20.5% target share. He also had a somewhat bigger role in week 5. It didn't result in targets, but we did see the route rate go up. And then, as I mentioned before with the Cardinals, and as we talked about with the Cardinals, Michael Wilson's going to run routes, but he just doesn't earn targets. It's just not what he does. He had a 13.5% target rate per route this past week, which is what he is. He's a 13.7% target rate per route. He might get a big play. He doesn't earn targets. It seems like Zay Jones might actually earn targets, right? And so if I'm going out there and saying, all right, I want a part of this, if I want that secondary option to Trey McBride, because it's going to be a lot of Trey McBride, even no matter who's starting, if Marvin Harrison's not there, I think Zay Jones is the guy I'm going after. Greg Dortch is there too. He got a touchdown, but not much change. So Zay Jones is definitely somebody to target in deeper leagues. I'll have him in the column as an ad. Like there's something there for sure for Zay Jones this week if Marvin Harrison is out.
Yeah, I think quarterback situation is a team downgrade, but not necessarily a downgrade for Zay Jones or the pass catchers. And Brissett's been definitely serviceable in the past to keep 1 or 2 fantasy options alive. And sometimes Kyler Murray he's so short, and trying to actually pass to guys across the middle can be pretty tough. So it's like certain players, I think their play style with him just doesn't mesh very well. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see Zay Jones be the kind of guy that can actually do well with Brissett. And I actually think Marvin Harrison Jr. would be maybe better with Brissett than Kyler Murray. Sometimes their two play styles just like completely a mismatch. And so I would say that the quarterback thing doesn't scare me away that much. But in general, yeah, things with the Cardinals offense do seem in disarray. Somebody's got to score. People loved Dortch. Dortch is a dynasty darling.
I love Dortch. Yeah,
I would not have been surprised to hear you say that.
It is one of those things though, like where his role and he got the touchdown and that's great, but his role's not going to change if Marvin Harrison is out. They're playing playing different positions essentially, right?
Yeah.
So his role's not going to change, and we kind of know what he is, right? And so I love Dortch, maybe he'll get a touchdown, maybe he'll get 10 targets. They are going against the Packers. It's a tough matchup. We'll see what happens. But yeah, it's just his role doesn't change too much. Another interesting situation because of injury, obviously with Puka Nacua. We're recording this on Monday afternoon. We don't know what the deal is with Puka Nacua and his ankle, although I will say they have a bye in week 8. The Rams do after their London game against the Jaguars, and they tend to be cautious with injuries. And so that would be the caveat I would give here as we try to figure out what's going to happen with Puka Nacua. Tutu Atwell didn't play last week. It seems like he's going to play this week, but then we also have Jordan Whittington. And so I'm not 100% sure where to go here, but I still think I might be leaning into Whittington just because both of them can play in the slot and kind of move around. We've seen Atwell play like 60% of his snaps in the slot or something like that. And so like from that perspective, that usage perspective, I don't know if it fits Whittington, but like Whittington's play style being more around the line of scrimmage, I don't know. I might be leaning more towards Whittington than Atwell, even if Atwell's back and healthy as we expect him to be, if Puka ends up sitting out. Where are you kind of sitting on that?
Yeah, I think the slot would be advantageous as long as he's still out there in a lot of two receiver sets and making sure that playing in the slot doesn't end up being this like third receiver role that means just a lot less volume. Tutu's been good in the past. I think he's more the home run hitter, so it also depends on what you need for sure. But I don't know. Both of these guys, I think it's pretty tough if you are trying to find somebody to rely on long term. I could see somebody else stepping up. Maybe like Stafford seems to be like Baker, where it's just a kingmaker kind of, and it could be a tight end or it could be more passing work to the running backs. But yeah, I think overall, if I wouldn't spend a lot on it. And I think after this week, once we see the snap percentages, you'll have a much better idea. Whoever is that number 2, I think would be valuable, but I'm not confident it'll necessarily be one of these guys getting the kind of work that Devontae Adams and Puka were splitting before.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of Devontae Adams, right? And then we saw Tyler Higbee have a good game this past week as well. And I mean, like, this isn't a long-term thing for Puka, at least. No, there's no indication that it is. I would be surprised if he doesn't play after their bye in week 9. So yeah, this is very much there's very much a 1 week thing where you're guessing a little bit. How about any other deep cuts? Any guys that you're interested in?
Yeah, I really like, we talked about Isaiah Davis for just a deep stash. I think in general, some of these running back stashes are just now hitting their inflection point, like a lot of these we talked about before, the DJ Giddens or I like Sean Tucker, but I think Bucky might be back in a couple of weeks. But I still think that that's a great strategy right now. It's just to hang on to a couple of those would be valuable guys. And then, especially if you're a team that's looking pretty good for the playoffs, you don't need that depth right now. You can transition that roster later in the season when you go for a playoff push. But for right now, I think it's still good to just take those big lottery ticket running backs usually.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned Isaiah Davis. Like, you also have we're not wishing ill upon anybody. We want Breece Hall to stay healthy, and if Breece Hall is healthy, it's probably not going to happen for Isaiah Davis unless Breece Hall gets traded, right? Which is certainly something we could see happen. He's, as we mentioned with the Chargers, he could end up on the Chargers, and so yeah, the Isaiah Davis one makes a lot of sense to me. I'll bring up Samaje Perine. I'm not like super excited about Samaje Perine because ultimately I think his best case scenario is he's in a timeshare in the Bengals backfield. I would much rather see them try out Taj Brooks or something like that. Taj Boyd, that's a name from the past. Taj Brooks. But we did see Chase Brown have a second lowest RB carry share this past week. It looked like a pure timeshare with Samaje Perine. Perine had 6 carries to 9 for Brown. He had 18 routes to 21 for Brown. Interestingly enough, in that limited role, Brown actually had his most efficient game of the season. So that's something. But yeah, this looks to be devolving into a timeshare, which in this offense, we'll see what Joe Flacco is able to do. We'll see if Joe Burrow is able to come back. In this offense, having a timeshare is certainly not exciting, but if Perine's on the passing side of that timeshare, then maybe you can get excited about it in deep leagues. So certainly someone to watch, and just that's more just like also a, hey, by the way, the Chase Brown thing, it might be over, right? Like even the one thing he had was like, all right, we're going to get 90% of the running back work. That might be done. And so that's kind of where we sit with Perine. But yeah, this is going to be an interesting week. There's a lot of these kind of guys out there. It's going to be a fun week. I worry, I haven't written the column yet, but I worry I'm going to have like 10 running backs and 11 wide receivers. And it's going to be a whole lot of, I don't know, this might be interesting. This might be fun kind of week. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. And maybe this will be your Kyle Monange breakout game, and then you'll have to change the article late at night. But
yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens on Monday night with the Bears rookies. We're going to get Luther Burden, Colston Loveland, and Kyle Monange. We're going to have a triple rookie breakout on Monday night. That's what we're rooting
Luther
for.
Burden's not a bad deep stash, I think, too. Post buy rookie bump, and we were trying to remember who the possible trade candidates were before the show, and we didn't mention DJ Moore, but I could definitely see him being a potential guy getting moved in a couple weeks.
Yeah, the vibes with DJ Moore haven't been good for a couple of years, and they weren't even good in the offseason with the new coach. Like there appeared to be some butted heads, and so yeah, that would be an interesting one. I kind of doubt it because the Bears are still competing, right? We'll see what they're able to do on Monday night, but they are still competing. But it's a good call out. We'll see what happens. All right. Freeman and I will be back to talk with you next week about the waiver wire heading into week 8. Make sure you subscribe wherever you find us. We really do appreciate the support. And there's just a lot more content coming out. We obviously have 2 weekly shows featuring Warren Sharp. Rich and I talk about the fantasy football week on Thursday mornings, or Thursday afternoon is when that comes out. So there's a lot available. Make sure you subscribe wherever you find us. Remember to check out the site, sharpfootballanalysis.com. Look at the blue bar. Starting on Tuesday, we're going to have our penny for our props for a penny. That's the wording. Our props for a penny that we do every single year. So you can get all of our week 7 prop recommendations for just 1 penny. Make sure you check that out. Make sure you head over to FAABLab. Again, get everything you need to know about this week, how much you need to bid for all these players. That's over at FAABLab.app. So make sure you check that out. And we'll be back to talk with you next week.